Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're set to deliberate with chief focus the two main portfolios of the last 24 hours that need to be discussed, to include the Islamic Republic of Iran and its rejection of the nuclear deal, at least its open rejection by the Supreme Leader. We're still not with an official response. Nevertheless, we will discuss that at length alongside the latest developments in the Gaza Strip. But before all that, it's important to know that today we mark day 608 since the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates launched their atrocities on October 7th of 2023, when this Palestinian terror group murdered over or almost 1,200, mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping 251 people. 56 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. Indeed, early this morning, or rather overnight, the IDF, in close cooperation with the ISA, launched a special operation to retrieve the bodies of Judy and Gadi Chagai. 70-year-old Judy and 72-year-old Gadi were kidnapped on October 7th by a Palestinian terror group. 2 months later, they were regrettably murdered by that Palestinian terror group, and thankfully now, 608 days later, they have been rescued. Both are dual American-Israeli citizens. Judy happens also to be, in addition to that, a Canadian citizen. But with all of that, let's now turn to introduce our experts for today, to include Ori Saschal, who is the head of research department at the IDSF, namely the Israel Security and Defense Forum, or Habitchonistim, as it's called here in Israel. Next to him, Colonel in Reserve Miri Eisen, who is a senior fellow at the Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University, formerly an advisor at the Prime Minister's office. And last but not least is Colonel in Reserve Reuven Ben Shalom, who is a cross-cultural strategist and a longtime panelist here at TV7, but also beyond that, of course, a senior fellow at the ICT. And today I'd like to start with you, actually, Colonel Eisen. Give us a little bit of insight into the rescue of the two elderly hostages. Unfortunately, they're coming back no longer amongst the living, but it does have much comfort, their return for the families. Mixed feelings.
One of the things I've been thinking about since they announced that they brought back a couple that were in their 70s, that live in a kibbutz and did for their whole life, with their children, with their grandchildren, and that they were rudely murdered, kidnapped, and then taken, is that the Israel Defense Forces, all of the different capabilities, with all of the failures of October 7th, they followed, they knew where to find them, even after over 600 days. We know where they are. We bring them back, because at the end of the day, and I'm so happy to say, from 58, we go down to 56, and my heart goes out to those 56. And that incremental slow movement is very hard for us, but we're at least going in that right direction. And this is at the heart of Khan Yunis, at the heart of what was really the kingdom of Yahya Sinwar. And in that sense, I really do have kudos to the capabilities of the IDF, of the ISA, in bringing them home. Let's get the other 56.
Absolutely. Our hearts go out to both the 56 currently in Hamas captivity, up to 20 of them still among the living, and we're waiting for them to return. And of course, our hearts go out also to the families of those hostages who are enduring days that only those who go through it can really imagine what this experience impacts in their personal lives. But Colonel Ben Shalom, the couple was captured on October 7th of 2023 by the Mujahideen organization, a terror organization, very Islamist, but also taking one step further, like jihadist rather, which is similar to Al Qaeda or those type of organizations that operate in the sphere of the terrorism employed by this radical ideology. Um, 2 months later, in December of 2023, they were murdered while in captivity, which just shows the length at which this evil individuals who were involved in the kidnapping of this elderly couple were willing to go. And naturally, as Colonel Isaac mentioned, kudos really to the IDF and ISA for being able in such a tough environment to still reach the location where the bodies were hid.
Well, you mentioned this issue of the faction that is different than Hamas, and this is true to a lot of the arenas that we're involved in. Sometimes it's easier for us to point the finger to the main power that rules, and it's also a matter of policy for us to say who's responsible. So, of course, Hamas is responsible for Gaza, but yes, it's much more complex. Remember that on October 7th, it was other factions that came in and also civilians. Hundreds, thousands of people poured into Israel. So some Israelis were just taken by individuals and belonging to the different factions, different organizations. So this was chaotic, and it was also chaotic for Hamas. Very difficult for us also as far as piecing everything together. And there's a huge effort underway since the beginning of the war of understanding where they are. Remember that we have to also manage our operations, so we try to limit as much as possible harm to our hostages. This is extremely binding for us and limiting in our operational efforts. Sometimes that even answers questions that were being asked of why are these our tactics? And now you understand in a way. The last thing we have to notice here is that we risked soldiers to do this. We could have actually lost soldiers. Just imagine soldiers could die in this effort to bring back bodies, even knowing their bodies. And this, in a way, shows something about us, about our culture, about our ethos, and something that we feel that is the right thing to do.
Well, Judy Chagai and Gadi Chagai, both, of course. Judy was 70, Gadi was 72. It's just unimaginable. I keep thinking about the fact that there are, of course, survived by 4 children, 7 grandchildren, something that also gives some, future within context. But of course, it doesn't diminish the heartache of this scenario. Mr. Yisrael, I'd like to hear your take on this. Colonel Ben Shalom actually mentioned something very important, that there are many terror organizations that took part in the atrocities of October 7th, including Fatah, the so-called leading faction of the Palestinian Authority.
Absolutely. And we tend to forget sometimes that while the October 7 massacre was spearheaded by the Hamas elite units, this was a war declared by the Gaza enclave against the state of Israel. And that would mean that all the political factions, all the military factions present in Gaza at the time were taking part in the massacre. So, for example, famously, Hamas prides itself with green bandits, and the green is basically the color that symbolizes Hamas, unlike yellow, the color that is typical to Fatah, that is the arch movement of the Palestinian Authority. Well, on October 7, we got footage, documentation that Fatah terrorists took part in the massacre as well. The same movement that is now in charge of the Palestinian Authority. So, and of course, like the Bibas family, the very unfortunate case, many Israelis were actually taken hostage by those other factions, controlled maybe by Hamas in the greater envelope of things, but still. Now, this makes it even harder to deal with than just with one organization, or to go one step further than with a neighboring country. Imagine the post-Yom Kippur crisis, where you had dozens of Israeli soldiers taken captive by Syria and Egypt. And we know personally of these stories of these soldiers coming back home after a bargain deal. And both countries recognized, even implicitly, that the other country is there to stay, and therefore there could have been a deal. But right now we find ourselves in an existential war where one party, Hamas, knows that they keep Israeli hostages as bargaining chips, and Israel vowed to destroy Hamas as a relevant entity. So this is where the hostages find themselves, sort of in this game in between those struggles. And in the end, Hamas is the one who started the massacre. Hamas is the one who can end the war today by releasing all hostages, laying down their arms, and agreeing to some sort of formula to take exile to another Arab country. They choose not to do that. They choose to keep fighting Israel, and so also make life miserable for the entire population of Gaza. This is the main barrier standing in our way right now.
Indeed. Well, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, of course, which is an Iranian proxy, is also yellow, similar to Hamas, and I think the majority of those that entered were actually of the PIJ. Nonetheless, there was a group of Fatah that was involved, and the fact of the matter is the Palestinian Authority never condemned October 7th and continues to perpetuate various lies related to this. So this is something that we do need to highlight as well. There is, of course, also the PFLP, the Palestinian Front for the Liberation of Palestine, that is carrying the red flag, and we're seeing the red and green, or the red, green, and yellow in this case, operating hand in hand, particularly across Europe, the United States, Australia, Canada now, seeing a lot more of what we saw in the past. But Hamas, the Palestinian Islamist group, offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, also operates in South Africa, where they have a very close relationship with the ANC, the ruling party there. So there are a lot of complexities and a lot of evil spread across the world, despite the designation of many of those groups by European actors, by various countries in the international community that do not follow through necessarily on those designations. And therefore, Colonel Eisen, I am quite surprised, or maybe not as surprised as I would like to be, with regard to the fact that at a time when the IDF and ISA go out to rescue two bodies, the United Nations Security Council spearheads a resolution just for a sheer charade, because they knew that the United States would veto it, brought forward by Algiers, Guyana, and one more, three countries that are naturally, Slovenia was one of the three, excuse me, three countries that are openly anti-Israeli and have been very much so for many years now. Slovenia, of course, is more fresh in the making, but nonetheless, the co-sponsors include also Switzerland, among others, something that quite surprised me in that context. And those who voted in favor included also France and Britain. Of course, they would not vote in favor unless they knew for sure that the United States would veto something like this. But the sheer fact that they were willing to say yes rather than abstain indicates that there is a fundamental issue also in their backyards when it comes to this.
One of the things that when we look right now at the United Nations, just as a setting for all of us, United Nations Security Council, 15 members, you have the 5 regular ones and 10 that change every once in a while. That's to make it simple for all the different ones. I look at the decisions that are made there and I think, do they show what's happening in the world? And in day-to-day life, I sit here inside Israel and there's a gap. And here I want our viewers to be aware of that gap, the way that we look at a war. We in Israel look at this war not through just October 7th and that attack of Hamas and all the other affiliates from the Gaza Strip against Israel. It wasn't a one-time attack. I want to put it in the terms of it was not a 9/11. It was an attack that was to take hostages. It was an attack to change the strategic situation. And what's happened after over 600 days is, rather than the world condemning that organization, condemning all of the different organizations there for holding the hostages, for doing such an attack, taking the hostages and trying to make them equal to prisoners that were arrested, put on trial, put inside jail, given in that sense access. I always wonder in that sense about Israeli jails where you can finish an undergraduate degree, where you can do all the different things that you do in a jail. May not be a nice place, but it's a place that you've been put on trial and arrested. And the equivalency that's happened right now in the Security Council, where it didn't pass only because of the United States, where essentially what they're saying is there's a war, Israel stop. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a second, the war is not about Israel. This war is about the taking of the hostages. It is about the destruction and annihilation, what Ol was saying before, the annihilation of Israel. It's about the different factions there that in this war continue to call for our annihilation. They openly state that they want to continue to do another October 7th. It's going to be Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, in this last week, backing all of those different factions and stating clearly that Israel is the cancer of the world, and as such, we need to be cut out. So you shouldn't be surprised. Look at the anti-Semitism that has broken out worldwide. And even though I don't think of the United Nations as being specifically anti-Semitic, what happens nowadays is that Israel is blamed pretty much for everything, both what happens in the Gaza Strip and much further. And I say it from the bottom of my heart. It's the worst thing I can think of, that I feel safer now in Israel, and I always have, than I do as a Jew anywhere in the world. And if I would step into the United Nations, I really fear for the Israelis, for the Jews, for anybody who supports Israel. I fear in that sense for those within the United States who do support Israel. Look at what's happening right now in the United States. So I know I went all over the place with my answer, but I'm not surprised by the Security Council, and I am very strongly supportive of a U.S. administration that openly inside the United Nations is willing to call out and say, you can't just stop the war, because there are a lot of casualties there, and there are casualties there. This war is about something deeper. Let's get at that deeper sense. The hostage is back, and as Ol said before, this is about Hamas winning. Who wants Hamas to win in this world? That would be a horrible outcome to an incredibly harsh and terrible war.
I will echo. I really closely looked at the speech by the U.S. ambassador, the acting U.S. ambassador, Ambassador Shea, who really provided, a lot of merit into what she was conveying there. And one of the points was that she found it outrageous, the fact that the majority of the UN Security Council, and at that, the United Nations at large, rejects the premise that Hamas could today announce that it is willing to accept an end to this war. And that is something that just makes a certain double standard to any other conflict currently raging or war raging around the globe, because there are two sides to this. Hamas is being hammered, and that is objectively seeing the reality on the ground. Today I spoke with a couple of Gazans, both in the southern Gaza Strip as well as the northern. I asked them, do you see Hamas? They said no, they're nowhere to be found. They're deep underground. From time to time, they rush out of the various tunnels, launch a certain missile or prepare a booby trap to try and draw in the troops into areas with IEDs of different types, and then flee again to their subterranean infrastructure, and then find their way back to embed themselves within civilian areas to ensure that if they're targeted, they're going to be a toll on the population of Gaza. This evil has to stop, and the fact that those countries are fully aware of this scenario, they're not oblivious to it, and still are willing to take that extra mile to alter discourse. I mean, take Canada, for example. The two bodies of Gadi and Judy who were retrieved were dual citizens, U.S. Israeli citizens, okay? Judy was also a Canadian citizen at a time when the judiciary in Canada is aiming to prosecute those same IDF soldiers who went to rescue their citizen from Hamas captivity. And that is something that I'm baffled by this. Colonel Ben Shalom, let's broaden the discussion since there are more issues at hand. The Islamic Republic of Iran is opting to reject the American proposal. They have not made so yet officially, but nevertheless, the United States, including President Trump, were quite clear saying, this is the final proposal. Unless you accept it, there are going to be consequences. What are we to take out of that?
First, thank you for rescuing me from that challenging topic before, because no one can say it better than Miri, and I learned a lot from her answer. The Iranian issue, I think they're still just demonstrating where they stand in the negotiations. So it's very obvious that the United States and Iran will voice the claims, this is what we're going to do. We're not going to agree to this. We're not going to agree to that. But I think this is just arm wrestling on the way to a deal. I think they both want a deal. The United States certainly doesn't want to reach a point where they have to carry out a military strike on Iran. Iran certainly doesn't want that, even though I've already said in one of our discussions, Jonathan, that in one calculus, I think Iran could conclude that it's better for them to be attacked by the United States than totally capitulate to the Americans. But I think they would rather have a deal where they meet the Americans halfway. And then when they meet Americans halfway, it will be a deal that if the leadership can be happy with, the people will have a problem. And I say the people also of Iran, also United States, and certainly Israel, because any deal will be a compromise. And when you have that compromise, there will be many people very concerned about the things you compromised on. Certainly from an Israeli perspective, even if the Iranians back down in many of the nuclear issues, that means they're going to be given so many more funds to continue their terror apparatus throughout the Middle East, weaponization, missiles, terror, rebuilding their proxies. So I think it's going to a troubling point, but I think that the parties have an interest to reach some kind of agreement and compromise.
Whatever the Iranians may think, they will not get out to the other side with enrichment. And that is something that the U.S. administration, despite having different voices currently in the administration, have convinced President Trump one thing, and that is zero enrichment. And we see that despite the isolationists having the upper hand in certain areas, they have failed to convince President Trump on this specific issue. And therefore, Mr. Yisrael, it seems like the Iranians are not willing to accept zero enrichment no matter what. Do you share the opinion that maybe it would be better for the Iranians to be bombed?
Yeah, look, these are two diametrically opposed positions in the negotiation. The Iranians say we will never give up on enrichment. The Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei just said it the other day. And a few days before, Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister, said the same thing. And I'm not optimistic about a deal. I am optimistic about the result of the failure of the negotiations. I am hopeful that the United States will eventually greenlight an Israeli strike or even lead one together with Israel. But because not in order to start a new war. There are many voices in the U.S. that are fearful, and that's a legitimate concern. But to conclude the present one, to put a lid on this war by denying Iran of its capabilities. And I always reframe it with my American friends. I tell them, by reframing the issue, I actually understand how we can end the present war. We are removing a looming threat by the Ayatollahs in Tehran, who have placed their best fortune and quite a lot of cash on developing a secret, covert nuclear weapons program, enriching uranium in underground facilities, and they are unwilling to compromise. And I am optimistic about the lack of, the White House leaders being the commander-in-chief and members of the administration are disillusioned about the true intentions of Tehran. We can see how the Trump administration, unlike the previous ones, is coming with quite strong demands from the Iranians. And my fear is that if we see a partial deal, that would mean that the Iranians will still have those underground bunkers that they can always, put the gun on the table, put the gun back in the basement, and then retract it, put it back up after 4 years. We need to destroy these nuclear facilities to deny Iran from ever being able to develop nuclear weapons again. The problem with the fundamental core problem with the JCPOA, the deal of 2015, was that the Iranians have always had the option to reinstall centrifuges and enrich uranium once again. And if the IAEA is to be believed, International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran has found itself in an unprecedented level of enrichment with over 400 kilograms of 6% enriched uranium. This is nearing a point of being a nuclear state. If they make one more step, and if Faridun Abbasi, the former head of the Iranian Atomic Agency, is to be believed, he said, if they ask me to produce a nuclear weapon, I would do it. This is something that should be of grave concern, not only to Israel, but the entire free world, and of course, primarily to the United States. This is about removing a threat, leading a strike against the nuclear facilities, removing a clear and present threat on the peace and security in the Middle East and around the world.
Absolutely. Well, to be quite honest, Colonel Ben Shalom's remark about the Iranians potentially wanting Israel to bomb them exclusively without the United States is not the first time I hear it. I heard it from people, a number of people, including a couple with swords on their shoulders as well as stars. So it is a broad speculation in a number of holes. I won't specify where, but nonetheless, Colonel Eisen, we have roughly 1.5 minutes, and I'd like to ask you, in the event that the strike does occur, naturally, the United States needs to take out also the ballistic missile program, as Iran is rushing towards the technology capable of producing ICBMs in order to reach the homeland.
There's no question that the Iranian military industry is at the forefront. Look at what they're supplying. They're supplying Russia with drones. They're supplying the Houthis both with capabilities and also with know-how. We all need to take note that the Houthis are the ones that are firing these different missiles against Israel. That knowledge, the background, the technology is coming from Iran. I always worry about the same thing that Reuven was saying before, Colonel Ben Shalom. I don't want this to be about Israel against Iran. It should not be that. This is about the Islamic regime of Iran against the world, against the Middle East, that main destabilizing aspect. And so I worry right now on the double talk in that sense, a bit from Washington, that at the end it ends up that Israel is the one that attacks alone. I don't like that because I don't think that this should be about the Israelis. It's not about them going against us. It's about, again, their idea that they have nuclear capability. I want everybody on board. I don't believe in them, and so I do think that there would be an attack, and I think that we need to attack not just the nuclear, but as you said, a lot of the different technologies that they've developed and exported.
I couldn't agree more, and I generally believe that the United States will take part. I also believe that not only the United States take part, but we won't expand on that. We'll keep the Iranians guessing. With that, I'd like to thank Colonel Eisen, Colonel Ben Shalom, and Mr. Issachar for all of your insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.